My name is Eitan Chatayat, and welcome to I'm That podcast, where I get to talk to some pretty incredible people. Some are friends and colleagues, some are clients, and some are people I haven't even met yet. On I'm That, we'll hear from them about who they are, what they do and why, stuff they love or hate, mistakes they've made, victories they've had. They're all known for something, but by the time we're through, the hope is they'll have revealed some things we didn't know about them. Our talk may be deep, profound, funny, who knows really. One thing for sure, it'll be interesting and honest. So if you're up for that, thank you for joining me on I'm That, and here we go. Shai Davidai is an assistant professor at the Columbia Business School, where he teaches negotiations and studies economic inequality and zero-sum thinking. Shai was born and raised in Israel and lives in New York City with his wife and 2 kids. Now, shortly after October 7th, as protests at Columbia University unabashedly celebrated the slaughter of Jews, Shai made a speech on campus that went super viral on social media. And that's how I met him.
If my amazing 2-year-old daughter was now 18 years old, I would never send her to Columbia. Not because it's not a great institution, it's an amazing institution, but because I know that she will not be protected there. Because the president of the university allows pro-terrorists to march on campus. We would never allow the KKK to march on our campus. We would never allow a pro-ISIS demonstration on our campus. Can you imagine in the city that had to endure 9/11, the worst attack on American soil? Can you imagine that here we have pro-terror student organizations? So what I want you to do now is I want you to go on social media. I want you to put this video online. I want this to get to every parent, every concerned mom, every concerned dad in around the United States.
And since then, he's been outspoken in documenting the growing anti-Semitism around the country and demanding that universities enforce their own rules and protect the Jewish and Israeli members of their community like they would protect anyone else. Shai, it's good to see you here.
Thank you for having me. I got to correct you on one thing. That's not exactly how we met, right? We met when I have been active, speaking up for months. And at some point, I just couldn't take it anymore. It was too hard. And I posted something online about how I'm just exhausted and I feel all alone. And speaking up is hard. Speaking up is a painful experience. And you reached out. You said, "Hey, I had this experience in the past. Let's talk." And we had an incredible chat with Yarden, my partner, and Dina, your partner, that was emblematic of everything, like all the good things that are happening here. Because there's a lot of negative, and we'll talk probably about the negative.
Oh yeah,
it's
yes,
hard. It's hard to escape the negative, and sometimes I get so deep into like focusing on all the negative. And then I remind myself and remind other people, like there's also this amazing growth of community of Jews and non-Jews that are just decent, reasonable people. So I consider you now like a strong member of my community. So
Thank you. I mean, of course I remember. I actually reached out to you as soon as you made that video. You posted it and you didn't have much of a following. And then I guess you exploded. So I don't imagine that you saw the message, but I was trying to help you back then. But
you know what? That's interesting because I think my trajectory has been different than many other people that are speaking up. That it just happened. Everything happened overnight. Like one day I'm an unknown person, and the other day I'm an unknown person with a following.
So let's for the people that don't know, we're not speaking to the Jewish global audience that knows you well. Let's talk about briefly who you are, and let's get to Columbia University. Let's get to what happened, and let's fucking talk about all that shit. So over to you. So give us the brief. Who are you, Shai Davidai?
So like you said in the introduction, I'm honestly, I'm a nobody, right? Let's start with that. I'm a nobody, and like people listening and like, who is this nobody? Then you're right. I am a nobody. I grew up in Israel. I've always been kind of like a brainy type, wanted to be, basically when I became an adult and I realized I have to pick a job, I had two rules for myself. I did not want to tuck my shirt in, and I did not want to wake up too early in the morning. And then someone said, "How about academia?" And luckily for me, I was a good student. I was interested in psychology, and I said, "Why not?" So in 2010, I moved to the U.S. to get a PhD in social psychology, and I've been here for the last almost 14 years. After graduating, getting my PhD, I spent a year working at Princeton. Then 3 years, I was an assistant professor of psychology at the New School, which is in New York City, and then moved to Columbia University in 2019 to the business school, where I'm a psychologist, a behavioral scientist at the business school. Up until October 7th, right? I had a very ideal kind of life, like obviously ups and downs, but most of my life was like teaching, doing research, being with my kids and family, weekends with friends, nothing out of the ordinary. Then October 7th happened and everything just kind of changed. Now, of course, it changed for a lot of people.
Well, let's hold on for a second there. Where were you when you first started hearing the news? What was your experience?
Yeah, so I like it. You rein me in because I can ramble on.
You're a rambler. I'm also a rambler, but I'm on non-ramble duty right now.
Nice, yeah. So we're living in New York City because of the time difference. For us, it started on Friday evening, right? So we were just done with Shabbat dinner. My parents were actually in town, so we had Shabbat dinner with my parents. They left, cleaned the dishes, everything. Then my wife and I kind of like smoked a joint to like relax, unwind. This is our Shabbat joint. And just before we went to sleep, we kind of like looked at our phones to see, kind of like automatic. And we got a message from Yarden's sister, who lives in Tel Aviv. She sent us a picture of her son, who's 1 year old, standing up in front of a big screen TV, and it says "barrage of rockets onto central Israel." And and we're used to it. It's ironic that we have to say this, but like as Israelis, we're used to it. So we said, okay, we are, and okay. So another time we're shooting rockets, and so we immediately kind of like texted our friends and family, seeing everyone's okay, and then we opened the news to see what's happening, and that's when it's really kind of like it dawned on us that this is different, right? This isn't like another round of missiles on civilian population. This is something of a much different scale. So we just stayed up all night watching TV. We were glued to the screen. People don't remember. It's amazing how quickly the human mind forgets. But those first few days, we were all worried that this is going to become an all-out war against Israel.
Well, I know that personally it was and still is as an existential threat. And so when you're feeling it for the first time, as I did, I was in Germany trying to get back home desperately. It was terrifying.
Yeah, it was just, but the first two things that I said to Yarden when we were watching this, one is, oh shit, this is going to be big. Because it was clear, it was clear that Hamas knew what they were doing. It was clear that they knew that Israel will respond, and it was clear that they will respond in a way that's proportionate to the crimes. So that was one thing. But the other thing, and I was right, but the other thing that I told Yarden is now the world's going to understand what it's like being us. And that I was wrong. I was probably too...
Right now you're wrong, but it's coming. It's coming.
I wish the world saw the pain, the suffering, the victims, and said, this is wrong, rather than had to wait and see until it's coming to the West. And, so that happened. And that first week is a bit of a blur, I have to say. We were all in shock and grief, right? Obviously, being once removed, being like in Israel, in the US, but being Israelis, like we weren't experiencing it like people on the ground in Israel, obviously. And people in Israel, some of them, if you're living near the border, you felt it more than if you're living in the center of Tel Aviv. But we were like thinking, how can we help? What can we do? And one of the first thing I did was I texted one of the vice deans at Columbia Business School, who's Israeli. And I said, hey, I want to organize something for our students, for our Israeli students. It almost like a parental instinct kicked in. It's like we have these students, they are 10 to 15 years younger than me. We need to make sure that they're okay. So we organized something for them. That was on a Wednesday. And I'm sorry, I'm going to go a little bit on a rant, but you'll understand why. So we organized on a Wednesday an event, and there's no other way of explaining this other than this was a cry fest. It was just like we were in a room together, Jewish and Israeli students and faculty, just talking about our emotions and our pain. And also, this is the first time that, students have seen me cried, which is not something professors typically do in front of their students. And at some point, one of the students says, hey, do you know about this protest that's organized for tomorrow? And we're like, no, what's this protest? So they pull out a letter that was published on October 9th, but was already drafted on October 7th by two groups at Columbia, Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace. And in this letter, they call October 7th an historic day. They refer to Hamas as freedom fighters. They applaud the resistance. It's just like horrible things that by now, 4.5 months later, we've all become so desensitized to this rhetoric, which is the reason I keep reminding people, like, this is not normal. This is not something you should desensitize yourself to. But back then, we were all just shocked. The dean of the business school was there in the meeting. And I turned to him and I said, that protest can't proceed. That's horrible. Like, this is support for terrorism. We can't let this happen here at Columbia. So the dean, who's great, he's not Jewish, but just a reasonable, decent guy, goes to the president and President Columbia and tells her, like, look, here's the letter, has her read the letter and says, like, this is support for terrorism. We cannot have this. The president was too much of a coward to actually do something about it.
What's the name of the president?
I actually cannot tell you this because I made her a promise that I will not name her out.
Okay.
But if you just Google Columbia's university's president, you'll see. It's,
So it's like a little loophole? You can't say the name, but you can say who it is. Okay.
It's not about loopholes. I made a promise to someone, because at some point she was getting death threats, just like myself. And I reached out and I said, hey, no one should be getting threatened with violence, no matter who they are. So I vow to not stop fighting the administration, but also for me, it's not personal, right? So, and I have to keep my word. So the president goes on and not cancel the protest, doesn't do anything. What she did do is two things. One, lock the gates of the university, which offended me not as a Jew or as an Israeli, but as a professor. Universities are supposed to be an open institution of learning for everyone who wants to come. And by locking the gates of Columbia University is a symbolic stance of saying, we are apart from society. But the other thing that she did which was more shocking, she brought in the NYPD on campus. The first time since the Vietnam War that NYPD came on campus. Now, it's clear why they came on campus: to protect the Jewish and Israeli students from the pro-Hamas mob. So she knew that there's a danger. She knew that this is problematic, but instead of staking something, she said, well, instead of dealing with the disease, she said, let's deal with the symptom. So I go to this protest, and in my mind, I'm going to support the Jewish students to take care of them. And what I saw was shocking. It was just a celebration of October 7th. A celebration.
When you say a celebration, paint the picture for us of real things that you were seeing.
So you see, in order to paint the picture, I have to first paint the 200 Jewish American students standing there. So there's about 200 Jewish American students. They're all wearing white t-shirts and blue jeans. if you know anything about the Israeli and Jewish community, that's kind of like our uniform for Remembrance Day, for a Holocaust Memorial Day. And we're all standing silently. It's a silent protest. And we're holding, each of them is holding a poster of the kidnapped kids that were kidnapped by Hamas.
And this is literally 2 or 3 days after?
This is on October 12th. So 5 days.
5 days. 5 days.
After October 7th happened. But 1 day after all the terrorists were either captured or eliminated, right? So, we have to remember, October 7th took a few days. So they're standing there across the quad, the university, the campus, about, I'd say, like 50 yards, 40 yards away. You see 700, maybe 800 students, all wrapped in keffiyehs, in COVID masks, in sunglasses, like making sure none of them is recognizable. Just singing and chanting and celebrating. Like there's no other way of saying it, like by shouting things like by all means necessary. Things that we are used to now. Again, this is desensitizing that's happening from the river to the sea, globalize the intifada, all this BS. And they're all moving as a mob. Like it literally takes on a life of its own. We're all moving together. They're chanting together. They have bullhorns, contrasted with the grief and the silence of the Israeli Jewish students. And I'm standing there in the middle. And at some point, an Israeli professor, but a few years older than me, leans over and says in Hebrew, "This is the anti-Semitism that our parents and grandparents warned us about, and we did not listen." When he said that, something changed in my mind. Because when he said that, up until that point, I thought this was a geopolitical disagreement. I was naive. I thought this is ideological. They want this, we want that. When he said that, I realized it's like the Wizard of Oz when the curtain is pulled and you see that it's not a wizard, it's just a person. You realize when he said that this is hatred. This is not politics. This is not ideology. This is hate. They are motivated by extreme hatred for the victims. And that's when things really change for me.
How so?
So I went home after the kids went to sleep and I just burst into tears. And it was like the first time that I really cried since October 7th. And I just could not stop crying. And at some point, Aaron asks me, "What's happening? What's going through your mind?" And I said, I saw the anti-Semitic beast that the Jewish writers of the 19th and early 20th century wrote about. That beast, that mob that supersedes any specific individual and moves through towns, moves through the shtetls, moves through synagogues and just devours everything in its way and just keeps going. And that is the mob we're seeing now. And I went online and I just wrote something about that, just about my experiences. And I ended the post and I wrote something like, my eyes, I've cried so many tears, my eyes are dry or something like that. Now, I had about handful, 100 followers on X, on Twitter, like 900, mostly academics, a few on LinkedIn. But I started seeing that people resonate with that. People started retweeting it saying, if you want to know what it's like being Jewish in the US right now, read this. Now, I didn't realize that I was lending my voice to other people's pain. I thought that this is just my pain and I don't want to be alone. So I want to express my pain. But people started retweeting and sharing and commenting. And I realized, I somehow tapped into our communal pain. And I felt a little bit less alone. And I just kept going. And every day I would post a few more things about what's happening in the world, what's happening at Columbia. And it all came to a head at that evening when the video was recorded.
Well, let's listen right now to some of what you said.
And I'm talking to you. I'm speaking to you as a dad. And I want you to know we cannot protect your children from pro-terror student organizations because the president of Columbia University will not speak out. against pro-terror student organizations. Because the president of Harvard University, because the president of Stanford, because the president of Berkeley, they will not speak out against pro-terror student organizations. Last Saturday, 14 U.S. citizens were kidnapped into Gaza with 200 other Israeli, French, German, and other nationalities. 14 citizens of the U.S. are right now kidnapped in Gaza. And yet the president of the university is giving her support to pro-terror student organizations. My 2-year-old daughter is a legitimate target of resistance. That is what they are selling. You are allowed to murder and kidnap my 2-year-old daughter in the name of resistance. And none of the presidents of universities all around the country are willing to take a stand. This is what cowards do. And I'll name it now. President Minouche Shafik of Columbia University, you are a coward.
Very powerful words. Tell us about what was going on.
So this was at an anti-terror vigil that a few of my students organized and said, hey, you should come. And I said, sure. And I'd love to say some words if something comes up. And we were standing at a circle. It was about in a circle. We're about like 35, 40 of us. And we were all like holding the posters of the kidnapped and holding candles and singing songs of grief. And then a few people started speaking up. This woman, Michal Zusman, who's been very involved with the hostages' families, she talked about her experiences. Now, this happened October 18th. So this is before most of us know what the experience of the hostages are. But because she was involved, she was talking about like the things that she's been hearing. And then another person spoke up, an Israeli student who was physically assaulted while giving out the posters for the kidnapped, reminding people of the kidnapped civilians. And he was physically assaulted. The perpetrator was arrested. Then a third person spoke up about his experience being Jewish on campus. And at some point I felt like, okay, I got to say something as well. And if you watch the video, you see that it starts with me being quiet. I'm kind of like clasping my hands to each other and my eyes are closed for a few seconds. And that was because I couldn't stop envisioning Kfir Bibas for weeks. Like the 9-month-old redheaded baby who was kidnapped from his crib, from his home. And I closed my eyes and I said to myself, like, I'm doing this for Kfir. And I started speaking. And if I'm being completely honest, everything blacked out. And then all of a sudden I say, thank you very much. And Yarden, my wife, she comes to me and we hug quietly for about 45 seconds, a minute. And then she says, that was great, but you went on for too long. And I said, what do you mean? I talked for 2 or 3 minutes. And she said, no, you talked for 10 minutes. I was unaware of that. And what happened next shocked me. I looked around and people were crying. And people came up and said, thank you, and hugged me. And I didn't realize what this is exactly, but I reckon that I tapped into other people's pain and just gave them words. So I went home and I watched the video and I was shocked. And ever since, I've only watched it once again, but I try not to watch it because it's too painful. And we put it online and I told Jordan, if this hits like 100,000 views by tomorrow, that's amazing because we'll be able to go back to our regular lives and things will change. The university will act and I can just go be a professor, a researcher, a dad, and focus on Israel, which is the most important thing. And when we woke up, it's just exploded. Like millions and millions of views. By some account, it's been up to 15 million views. Hundreds of people from all over the world sending me messages of support, of love, but also of commiserating and saying how much they feel exactly the same thing. And I'm not a spiritual person. I'm not a religious person. I am very kind of like very materialistic, rational person. But I do feel that somehow in those 10 minutes, I tapped into our communal grief. And there's nothing special about me or who I am, but there was something in the moment and the people around me that allowed that to happen. And I'm grateful for that. But it also changed everything.
How so?
I mean, my life, our family life everything is divided there's until October 18 when I spoke up. And then since October 18th, my professional reputation has been like dragged through the mud. Most of my colleagues won't speak with me. I've been getting so much hate mail, hate emails online that I've had to grow a thick skin very quickly because at first it was just too much. I still cannot understand how people can harbor so much hate in their hearts for someone they do not know. I jokingly say, at least give me the honor of knowing me before you hate me. Maybe you'll find something to hate, but at least give me a chance. We've lost many, many, many friends who we thought were friends. We're not really friends, but people.
Did they tell you why? Did anyone tell you why they're not in touch with you? Why they stopped being your friend? And if they did, what kind of reasons were they?
Look, most people I've found out are afraid of confrontation. And maybe most Americans, I don't know if it's most people, but most Americans that I've met are afraid of confrontation. And they would rather just disappear from your life without an explanation than tell you why. But, through the grapevine, you hear. I mean, the worst has been when your dense friends have lost contact with her because of what I've been doing and speaking up. If you go online and you want to learn about who I am, right? There's two ways to do it. You can go and read what I've been saying and doing, and you'll have one view. Hopefully your view is like a liberal, left-leaning Jewish Israeli who has full empathy for civilians on both sides, but at the same time will not apologize for Israel's right to exist. Yet, if you go online and want to learn about me, and instead of focusing on what I've said, focus on what people have said about me, the image will be of a genocidal maniac who's all for murdering babies and attacking people just because they are Palestinians, which is the complete opposite of who I am. But that's the image that the online mob has garnered about me. And a lot of people, even people that I know, people that I've had coffee with, that I've had, in my professional career, but know me personally, have bought into this narrative. And the narrative is strong. So I don't blame them. What I do blame them is for not giving me a chance to explain myself. Ask hey, Shai, I read that you support genocide. Is that true? I was like, no, of course not. That would never be true. I would never support any form of violence. How could you even ask that? But people don't even give you that. I have some ideas why, but
It sounds very lonely.
It is very lonely. But I would rather have a few people in my life that accept me unconditionally than many conditional friends. I don't need people who are fair weather friends. I need people who support me through thick and thin, even if they disagree with me. So and luckily, and this is the flip side of all the negative that's been happening, is we've created this new incredible community of Jewish and non-Jewish people who just get it.
And you're leaning into them. Is that how you're kind of like coping?
I would say more than leaning, I am falling on them sometimes. I don't know if falling is the right word. Like it's like, have you ever played that game, the trust game, where you like there's a stranger standing behind you and you have to close your eyes and lean backwards and like trust that they will catch you?
I just saw it yesterday, but I saw the one where the guy falls forward.
Oh no, that's not. That's on him. That's on him.
Don't get him. But yeah, of course, I'm familiar. Yeah.
But that's what I've been experiencing. These people that I've met in 2-3 months ago, and I feel completely comfortable closing my eyes, leaning backwards, and knowing that they'll be there. Yesterday, I went to a bar in my neighborhood, and I contacted someone that I've only met a few times, again, through social media, a very strong organizer in the Jewish community. And I said, hey, I'm feeling alone. Can you bring up a few other people that are feeling alone? And she mustered up 10 people. Many of them are social activists in social media. And we just had a beer, 10 people. And, partly talking about our emotions, partly talking about how can we help each other in our fight. But just knowing that everyone was there and is there and can be there for you has been so incredibly helpful. And a lot of times when I speak to, now I've been speaking a lot with teenagers, with college students, with their parents, kind of like preparing them for what to do when they'll be in college. And I kind of give them the three C's, right? First of all, you need courage, because right now you're entering a minefield and you need courage. The other thing that you need is constructiveness. It's like, and I think you've done this a lot. Like, don't fight in a destructive way. Be constructive. Show the lights that we have. And the third thing that you need is community, because you cannot do this alone. No one can do, maybe Michael Rappaport. But other than Michael Rappaport, I don't think anyone has the mental build to actually do this alone. And this is true for any fight. It has nothing to do with Judaism, Zionism. You need community, you need constructiveness, and you need courage.
Why do you need that? Like, what's going on? Remember, like, there are the people who, our community, the Jewish community, I think a lot of people know your story. And then there are the people who will never hear this and we don't want them to because they're haters. But then there are people who are listening who really don't know much about the Jewish, Muslim, Israel, Palestinians. It's all kind of just always there. So why do these college students need those things? Like, can you just break it down very clearly so that someone who is uninformed but might be curious to know what's going on? What is it that we're talking about here?
Absolutely. So I'll simplify this for everyone. What's happening on US campuses is not about Gaza, and is not about Palestine, and is not about Israel. That's the form, but that's not the content. What's happening in US campuses is a literal fight for Western values. On the one side, you have people that are openly supporting terrorist organizations. Right now, those two organizations are Hamas, which is an Iranian-backed terrorist group, and the Houthis, who are in Yemen, and they're another Iranian-backed terrorist group who is, at these very moments, in a war against the US and Britain. That's what the students at Columbia and Harvard and Penn and Stanford and Berkeley and UCLA and all the things you see, that's the thing that they're supporting. They'll tell you that they are opposing what's happening in Gaza and the loss of life. And by the way, the loss of life is horrific, and I feel a lot of pain just thinking of Palestinian civilians losing their kids, their loved ones. But these protests began before any even one Israeli soldier entered into Gaza. They started on October 8th, a day after the massacre, and they were all about supporting Hamas. When the Houthis joined the fight, they started supporting the Houthis. So this is about a small camp that's saying we believe in life, we believe in liberty, we believe in, rape is always wrong, no matter who the victim is. We believe that civilians should never be targeted. And then there's this other camp of radical extremists who, for some reason, have developed a deep hatred to everything that America stands for. Now, the United States is not, it has many faults. Every country has many faults, and the U.S. is not excluded by that. It has a very fraught history and the present. But what it stands for, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, are things that should not be under question. Yet these radical extremists on campuses, that's what they're railing against. Right now, the form is focused on Israel, but the content is that. That's why when you go to the smaller, more peaceful rallies that we hold, you don't just see Israeli flags, you also see American flags. You don't just see Jewish and Israeli students, you also see non-Jewish students who are vets from the US military, and they know what this is about because they have fought this war. Basically, what we're seeing is the war on terror on US campuses. It's as simple as that. Everything else that someone tells you it's about Palestine or about Gaza or about this or the UN or the ICG or whatever it is, they are trying to obfuscate this, to confuse you, to make it complicated for you to take a side.
Now, you said terror, but it's a very specific terror which has Islamic fundamentalism, radical Islam, not moderate Islam, radical Islam as its core. That's what the people who are on the streets demonstrating, I think a lot of those people, they don't see that. Now, some of them do, the people who know Hamas and really intimately want to see Israel gone. But some people don't understand. So this confusion amongst specifically the liberal left, and you're a liberal left, you're Jewish Israeli, but you're liberal left. What is it that they are doing so well, these Islamic fundamentalists, these radicalized jihadists, that is fooling a huge, massive percentage of the population?
Look, it's not that they are not seeing it. It's that they do not want to see it. They turn their head and look the other way whenever Hamas speak about how things should be all patriarchal and women should not have rights. They turn their heads when Hamas throws gay men off of rooftops.
Yeah. But why? Why do they do that? Why do they turn their heads?
Because they have an identity, that they have bought into that identity. And anything that threatens that identity is something that they cannot cope with. In the same way that in the 1960s, 50s and 60s, you had all these pro-socialist communist people in the US turning their heads to the largest massacre of civilians in the 20th century that was enacted by Stalin, right? People have an amazing ability to not see what they do not want to see. Now, I would say this, the second thing is that the Hamas and their mouthpieces on US campuses, their Hamas apologists on US campuses, they have been able to tie their fight or frame their fight as if this has anything to do with the racial inequalities in the US, the social inequalities that we see here. This is why we see such nonsensical things being shouted again and again, calling Israel a white colonialist state, which is, one, we're majority non-white, and two, we're non-colonialists, right? We fought the British Empire. My grandfather was imprisoned by the British when he was 17 because he was part of the fight against the British. But the facts don't matter. When you are devoted to an identity of seeing yourself as a good person and not questioning yourself, am I a good person? Then you get to this point where you become actually a mouthpiece for the evil people.
So that's interesting. You said that they like almost can't face the reality that maybe they're not good people. Well, what's a good person? I mean, it's not good or evil. Like to me, it's someone who will look in the mirror and face their demons, right? I mean, to me, when you say that, I'm wondering, well, what's a good person? What type of person should we expect and want them to be, as opposed to the type of people that we're not happy seeing?
I don't know what a good person is, and philosophers since Aristotle have been debating this. I can tell you what I view. I am a committed liberal. Now, when I say I'm a committed liberal, I don't care about the label liberal. I don't care. You can call me whatever you want. My values are liberal. What does that mean? That I see every life as valuable and worthy of protection. And when I say every life, I mean every life. Not every life, but a caveat for just not the Israelis or just not the Jews. Also, not just every life, but just not the Palestinians. Every life. When I am a committed feminist, which is part of my liberal views, then I believe all women, not just a subset of women, not most women. I believe all women. When I say that I believe in Israel's right to self-determination, the Jews' right for self-determination, it's not because I think the Jews deserve something special. I believe that every nationality, including the Palestinians, including the Jews in Israel, have a right for self-determination. For me, that's what it means to be a true liberal. When you have professors with PhDs in gender studies refusing to accept the mass evidence of the systematic use of rape against Israeli civilians, Israeli women on October 7th, to me, that's not a true liberal. To me, that's not a good person. You have to treat people equally to be a good person.
Are they aware of... See, the problem is when you said, people, they turn away. They can't face the facts, and facts don't matter. Why? I mean, these are good people. I mean, not everyone who doesn't believe these things are evil. They're not evil people. I think they would agree, a lot would agree that, Israelis, Palestinians, Jews, Muslims should and would want them to live in peace side by side. But they're seeing something which we know is not the truth, but it's their truth. How do we get them to see the truth? Because I keep thinking of Nazi Germany, and you think an entire nation and a lot of Europe believed that the Jews were subhuman. I mean, you saw this happening. It wasn't just the Nazis. The Nazis came to power. They were a machine, but people were brainwashed. And it took decades for them to be, quote unquote, deprogrammed. And look at Germany today. I mean, you still have a lot of anti-Semitism, just like you do everywhere. But for the most part, I was in Germany trying to get back home to my family on October 7th. And I was helped by German individuals in a way that is deeply, deeply moving. From paying for my hotel, helping me get a ticket, driving me to the airport, which was hours away. So when you have this inability to see truth as someone in the education, a field, what can we do about that? Where do you see us getting out of this?
So, do you know that feeling? It happens a lot in the summer. You wear sunglasses, and in the beginning, everything looks a bit dark, and then you get used to it. And then when you take off your sunglasses, you're shocked how things
Blinded.
actually look. You're blinded. You're shocked that you thought that things looked one way, and you realize, oh no, those were the sunglasses. right? That's what we're seeing now. People that are putting sunglasses that are filled with hate, and they won't let in certain facts. They won't let in certain narratives, certain empathy. And until they take off their sunglasses, nothing will happen. Now, you nor I can take off their sunglasses. Someone who closed their heart to October 7th and the images we saw coming out of October 7th, you nor I will ever be able to open their heart. And that's not my fight. My fight is not for those souls. Those, in my mind, are lost souls. But luckily, they are still the minority. They're growing really fast because they have a hate-filled social media machine, and they're able to recruit more and more people, but they are still a minority. My fight is for the souls of the majority, I'm in the US, so the majority of Americans who are silent, who are keeping silent, who will not take a stance because they think this is a geopolitical issue. And that's why I always say this is not a geopolitical issue. This is a fight against evil. It's Western values versus terrorism, humanity versus evil. And if you do not take the side of humanity, you are helping evil. That's my fight. You can say, and that's why I tell people, you don't have to agree. You don't have to say pro-Israel. Don't be pro-Israel. We're Israelis. We can do without pro-Israel. All we need you to be is anti-Hamas. You can be pro-Palestinian. You can be pro-Israel or not, but you need to be anti-Hamas, anti-Houthis, anti-Hezbollah, anti-Iran. That's it. It's very simple. Those people are a bit afraid to speak up. They don't want to get it wrong. And I'm here to tell them, don't be afraid to speak up. We, the decent majority, have your back. That's how I hope that's how you educate people. But I don't think right now we're ready for the de-education that you were suggesting. The one thing that I think is really incredible is for the first time in history, we have a incredible rise in anti-Semitism that is being documented in real time. So 20 years from now, if someone comes up and say, like they did after World War II, oh, I didn't know, or oh, I didn't do this, we are keeping the receipts and we will know exactly what you said or did not say, whether you stood up or not, and we will remember. So in 20 years, don't come begging and saying like, oh, yes, I actually did support you, because you did it. When they come for you, you won't be able to say that. So you have to speak up now.
Shai, I'd like to do two things. One is for the podcast and for taking the time, I'd like to thank you and for sharing all of your thoughts here. And on a more personal note, I'd like to thank you for doing exactly what you're saying other people should be doing, for speaking up on that night, for sharing it for the world to see, and for continuing to fight, because I think that this is going to be a very long war. And when I say war, I don't mean the conflict that we have in our neighborhood. I mean the war for Western values. And I do think a lot about 9/11, because for us, we were, we're not 20-year-olds that were very, very young when it happened, super young. We remember also the response to it and the shock in America and the threat of radical Islam. And so I want to thank you for being able to distinguish between the conflict of land and peoples and showing the conflict for what it really is, which truly is a war of ideology. And so thank you for speaking up on behalf of a lot of people. It takes immense courage and bravery. And thank you for that. And thank you for being with me today.
Thank you very much. I mean, I do want to dispel one thing. The only reason why speaking up right now takes courage is because not a lot of people are speaking up. If everybody spoke up, it would become a normal thing.
I agree. But while everyone is not speaking up,
they will. They will.
But we're not talking about that. We're going to talk about you for a second, because you are, I just think that it's great, and I think it's important and needed, and not for the Jewish people only, for morality, and that's what I'm thanking you for. So take the fucking compliment.
I'll take the fucking compliment. I'll say this: I will. There are voices that are trying to silence me now, and I promise people, as long as I know that people are there for me, I will not be silenced. I will speak up, and not just about anti-Semitism, about everything that's wrong with society and how we can fix it.
I will be right behind you, brother. Thank you.
Oh, don't be behind me. Be next to me.
I'll be right behind you, next to you, in front of you, on top of you, and below you. How's that?
I love that.
All right. Thank you, Shai. Well, that's it. Thank you for joining me on I'm That. I hope you enjoyed the chat, and I hope you'll join me for our next guest. In the meantime, definitely hit subscribe, whether you're on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, or any other platform. And if you can, leave a comment, give it a like, and tell your friends. That would be brilliant. Stay tuned for the next show, and see you soon.